All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's really good to see a lot of you. It's been a while, and this is a very familiar and beloved community. And I appreciate the opportunity for John and Anne and me to be here together to share our book project with you. So before we start, I just want to take a moment where we can greet each other. Maybe breathe together as hello, Anna.
Well, Anna, Anna from Georgia, the country, has just arrived. A dear friend.
Welcome, Anna, and everyone else who joined. So, can we just take a minute to really greet each other with our eyes, breathing together and being present together for a moment? Thank you, everyone. Okay, well, I am Amy, and I'm here along with Anne Yeomans. I'm going to wave Anne and John Shotland. And we are here to talk about a book that we lovingly co-created with 13 other authors called Willing to Love, Stories of the Couple's Journey as a Path of Transformation. Anne is holding it up. The book contains 11 diverse stories of committed relationship as seen through the lens of psychosynthesis. I believe it is the first of its kind, which is very exciting. And it's been, some of us, especially Anne, have been involved in this for many years, and John and I for slightly less than many years, but quite a few years. And we're celebrating its recent publication and release into the world. Just to tell you a little bit about what we're doing today. First, are there many people here who are not familiar with psychosynthesis? Okay, well, that's wonderful. You'll know the lingo. So today we are going to be exploring the concept of being willing to love, as the title says, in the context of committed relationships. And this can be applied to any kind of relationship because loving someone is always a choice. So even if you're not in a committed long-term romantic relationship, perhaps there's someone in your life who you would like to consider what it means to being willing to love them. And we're hoping that through our shared discussions that you will discover something that opens the door for you, and perhaps something that brings, as John says, brings a living practice of psychosynthesis into your relationship. I'm just going to quote a little bit, one paragraph from the intro to the book, which was by both Anne Yeomans and Diane Rossman. It says, this book is a collection of love stories, not pie in the sky, romance novel kind, but real life, bread on the table love stories. Each of the following 11 chapters offers an intimate glimpse into a couple's life together. They are brave stories because making a long-term commitment to another person requires self-awareness, humility, and a generous spirit. As each story shows, being willing to love over time will wake you up and grow you up too. So today we're each going to read a little bit from our chapters and then open the floor for sharing, questions, comments for each of you. And then we'll go into dyads and have an opportunity to explore what's up for you in relationships right now. I am now going to hand it over to Anne for a few more comments, and she's also going to lead us in a tune-in.
I'm so glad to see some people I haven't seen for a long time. And Amira just arrived, and Anna is here, my student from Russia first. And this is this is the miracle of Zoom, you know, it's extraordinary. It's the strange gift that COVID brought us, that we can now have a conversation across time zones and oceans. And I'm just kind of awed by its possibilities, even though I really like sitting in a room with people. And if we were all together in a room, I would be even happier. But we're not, and this is possible. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of making this book, which was uh, really like something I've never done before. Have you ever written a book with 16 people? Probably not. I don't know who has. And maybe you do it once in a lifetime, but that's what we did. And in the beginning, I should say, so you know, there was no one of us who knew everybody. And there were people who didn't know any of the other authors. But slowly we evolved and came to know each other deeply and respect each other and love each other, really, I think. And that got us through some hard places. And then people found their place. And at one point, someone said, well, we need some editors. And 4 people who like words and like writing, I was one of them, showed up, and we became a little circle ourselves. And then later there was we needed someone who was interested in design and the cover. And those people came. And then it became publicity and marketing, which is where we are now. And that became the Pub Club. So it's been a real experience of group, and in a way that, you know, we long for, but we don't always have. And I was thinking, as I thought about what I wanted to say, is something bigger than all of us was holding us. I feel that very strongly to bring this book forward. And we never talked about it that way, but we were all oriented that way. And we were all either therapists or trainers or teachers or practitioners of psychosynthesis. So we shared that orientation too. So that was the very long process. As I was reading about my chapter, which I read a little about later, I was noticing that I said had been married 55 years, and then there's another place I say I was been married 56 years, and another place and I really should change it to 58. So that shows a little bit how long I've been working on this. And I didn't plan to do it either. Somehow I got quite involved. So that's the mystery. So a lot of gratitude to the whole circle of people who created this book. And this is, by the way, our first gig. So you're our welcoming committee. We have not taken this out before, and we're excited to bring it to you. So I'm now the person to do what John and Amy call a tune-in, and I call it, I think, a centering meditation. So here we go. Take a moment to go inside. And realize that you're here. You're not trying to get on Zoom, you're here. And find your breath. Feel your breath moving in and moving out. And let yourself settle. Let your breath bring you here. And imagine for a moment that these boxes, these Zoom boxes, I think they're called tiles, the edges of them dissolve. And we begin to find ourselves in a large circle in a meadow. We're outside, and you'll need whatever you'll find whatever you need to be comfortable and safe and the right temperature. And in the center of our circle is a fire burning. It was waiting for us. And around the circle, there is another circle of big trees. So breathing in and breathing out, settling into our circle, feeling the presence of the trees, feeling the presence of each other. And we've gathered here today to explore the question of relationship, the principle of relatedness. The principle of interconnectedness. So in this moment, bring that into yourself. And down to what's personal for you about that. What question, what issue do you bring to this exploration, to this inquiry? And feel the presence of the big trees around us, our relationship with them and with the meadow and all the creatures who live here. Our world has not done well with the principle of relationship, of relatedness, of interconnection. But we have a chance together to think about that. Undoubtedly, we've been working with this all our lives. So as you sit, notice what you're feeling, what's alive for you. What issue, question you bring today to this exploration. Breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. And let's stay in this circle for the remainder of our time. And when you feel ready, let your eyes come open. I think it's to you, John, when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, Anne. So we'd like to open up a space for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. If there's any sharing that people want to offer from that opening meditation around the themes that Anne spoke to of relatedness in our world and kind of what's coming up within you, perhaps a question that came to you. We'd love to hear your voices. This is a conversation today. It's a book reading plus, and the plus is you. So if anybody has something they'd like to share, we'd like to hear from the plus, the group. What brings you here today? You came to something that's about relationships and psychosynthesis. And yeah, Tom.
I have, we have been exploring relationship in a much deeper way for a while, and just recently looking into each other's eyes more deeply. And I'm noticing, like, oh, together or separate, like, how do I let myself go totally to be in relationship with just letting it all go, letting all this self stuff go. It feels kind of transpersonal in a way.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you for that lead in. And where I went to with that was my relationship with the air and the trees has changed immensely in the past few years. COVID was really helpful for that. And reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, I'm forgetting the name of it right now, the one that I read, Braiding Sweetgrass. So that was really nice to switch from thinking about relationships has to be with a person, that I'm more focused on my relationships with the natural environment right now. So I appreciate that.
Thanks, Ami. Who else would like to get their voice in as we begin? Yeah, Mindy.
Well, I really loved it when you began and you opened up the tiles and we all kind of went into this space, which is just perfect for me. And I was really enjoying that. And I love what you said, Ami, because like I've just really been noticing lately that everything is relationship, everything, right? And so when I'm drawing, when I'm realizing the relation, everything, I'm kind of so zoomed into that. For this, I came with the trying to open myself up to more of people and marriages and stuff. And mine didn't last, so I'm curious about this. And I work with clients. I don't work with couples, but I work with one side of couples. And I really feel like I actually support relationships better that way. So this really intrigues me because it's about people who are in the couples, but not both parts of the couple wrote the book. So I'm just making me curious. And that didn't come from the meditation. I went into that field and enjoyed that space so much. So thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. Ruth.
Hi, everybody. So nice to see everyone. Just hearing other people talk and just that meditation is just thinking about relationships. And I guess I want to just share, I know the book is mostly about, couples and long-term relationships, but I've been thinking a lot about family, kind of broader family, and being in relation to the family that we're either born or married into. And just recently had the experience of talking to a family member, hanging up and saying, I absolutely love this person, and this is toxic. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in this family right now. And it's just an interesting place to be. It's like, it's easy to be like, oh my God, these people annoy me, or I hate this person, or I'm mad at this person. I don't want to have anything to do with them. And to just feel like my heart is broken. It's like, I think sometimes family is the most complicated. You choose a marriage or a partnership. You don't necessarily choose a family. And I mean, people do choose they do choose family, and I understand why, because it's just so complicated, and reminds me a lot. I haven't had the experience, but it reminded me of very close friends who've had, sons and daughters or other family members who've had addictions in such a way that they just couldn't be in relationship with them anymore. And it's not that they didn't love them any less, but it was just like, this is too toxic. So just something I'm kind of sitting with and struggling with. And how do we keep loving in the face of, real challenges is, I guess, the bottom line. And keeping ourselves safe and keeping and sort of respecting our own needs. Random thoughts.
Thanks, Ruth. Let's all breathe into that one. Families. This topic reaches far. Let's hear from Val.
I just wanted to echo some of what Ruth is saying. That's been for a couple of years now, a big journey of mine is a family situation. But what came up first for me as we were talking about relationships is, and I just want to put it in the room, relationship with my child, my kid, is my primary relationship at the moment. And yeah, so choosing to love, I love that idea of like, it's a continuous choice. It's choosing over and over again. And there certainly have been times when, everything else is baffling about the relationship. But when someone reminds me, just love her, that it all gets so simple.
Thanks. Anne, you wanted to get your voice in?
I want to add in something. I made that choice to speak about it in the principle as the principle of relatedness because I did. Because that's what I think about a lot, and because actually I think what we were doing in the specifics of our committed marriages that we talk about was working with that, grounding it in every day. But also made me think of the preface to the book by Molly Brown, who some of you know of, an eco psychotherapist with a deep background in psychosynthesis. She says, I believe that how we treat one another in our intimate relationships directly relates to how we treat others in our larger community, in our world, as well as how we relate to plants, animals, all living creatures, and the earth itself. The same patterns of relationship operate on all these levels.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anybody else before we begin our sharing from our chapters? Let's hear from David.
Hi, everybody. I'm a relative newcomer to this circle here, so just want to appreciate all of you who've made these events happen, and particularly glad to be here for the book that Amy and so many of you have produced here. So thanks for the invite to be here this afternoon. thing I wanted to appreciate your tuning in there, Anne. And the thing that came to me was more about marriage, and if it's not marriage, at least, you know, one significant partner. And particularly as a father of two teens, soon to be beyond their teens, young adults who are spreading their wings, how we can teach the next generation, or sort of impart some of the learning we've gained through our own experience to the next generation, without warping their thinking, but perhaps supporting and freeing them from some of the, what I would say in my own experience was some baggage and some of the things that have impaired my own relationships, particularly my own close relationships and marriage and so forth. So that was the place I went to, and would just be would be interested to hear other folks' thoughts on how we do that.
Okay. So hold these questions, whatever they are, and new questions may form over the next bit of time, because, and then we're going to go into dyads later on in this event, and we'll have a chance to kind of talk about these questions that we're sitting with David and others, and whatever the relationships are and whatever the work is for us. And hopefully more will get stimulated as we continue.
You know,
So
John,
I'm going to move us. Yeah.
before you
Yes.
go, I was thinking, listening to the comments, and David's particularly, there's a new book waiting to be written. It's called Willing to Love as a Parent. Okay, that's it. You go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
And willing to love in the family.
Yeah.
What does it all mean? Okay, so let me set a little context, and then I'm going to read a little bit from my chapter, and then turn it over to Amy and Anne. You'll hear a little bit from these 3 chapters. There's 11 chapters. There is no one voice, which is also what's amazing about this book. Nobody went through and cleaned it up and made it sound like one person wrote the book. It didn't get homogenized. There are 11 very different stories written in different voices, which is one of the really cool things about the book, because there is no one way to be in a relationship. Just your way. So a question came to me that I haven't thought about in a long time as Anne was tuning in. And it was 9 years ago. I was in Florence, Italy, at Assagioli's Institute, at the Casa Assagioli. We did an opening ritual, and people were asked to bring a stone. In the opening ceremony, we walked into the middle with a question, and we dropped our stone into the urn. And I'll never forget, a bunch of people spoke, and all of a sudden, without understanding what was going on, my legs started moving towards the center. My body moved before I knew what my question was. And I thought, hope the question comes to me by the time I get to that urn. Because I just felt it was time. I walked to the urn. And when I got to the urn, in the 15 seconds it took to walk to the center, I knew what my question was. I'm going to tell you, it was, how is psychosynthesis more than just for myself? And it's amazing. I haven't thought about that question in 9 years. And I think that's what brought me to this book.
Mm-hmm.
That psychosynthesis, there's something within psychosynthesis that intuitively, for me, speaks to the relationships and the spaces between people, and healing those spaces and understanding those spaces in a relationship, in a family, in groups, and that there's the future of psychosynthesis, and Tom was actually interviewed by the European Psychosynthesis Association on Friday. If you can get a hold of that video, Tom, that was a wonderful and moving interview. Hopefully you've seen some of the feedback, Tom. It's beautiful. But he talked about the future of psychosynthesis, and the focus may shift. It was used to be this, and now it's this, and later it'll be this. And a lot of it's been about the individual work, which is critical, it's crucial. But it may be that the future of psychosynthesis is more than just about individual self-realization. It may be about our experience of being together. So that's just fascinating to me. So that, in a way, is a big part of what the book, how I approached my chapter. I wanted to write about the principles of psychosynthesis as they relate to relationships between people. And in this case, couples, but that's come up today, between people. How does psychosynthesis inform, and how is it reflected by the relationships that we have with people? So my chapter, and I'm going to share a little bit from it, is called, so I wrote about psychosynthesis and then tried to elaborate relationship in those principles. So my chapter is called Assagioli's 7 Core Concepts and the Life of the Couple. But having listened to this conversation today, so far, it could just as easily be retitled Assagioli's 7 Core Concepts and the World of Relationships. It's not just about the couple. So I write about all 7 core concepts, and I'm just going to share a little bit today from one of the concepts so you can get a flavor of how did I write about psychosynthesis and relate it to couples or relationships. So from the section on synthesis, here's a couple of things. First thing I want to share is that every one of us is born of synthesis. The egg and the sperm coming together in a moment of dynamic creation to form the living embryo. Human life itself is dependent on this process. Similarly, a relationship is the coming together of 2 distinct people to form a new entity as a couple, in this case, as we're talking about couples. In this sense, the process of synthesis is both a life-generating, when the embryo was formed, and a love-activating principle.
Oops.
That was a very fun sentence to write. In this sense, when you write, you have a few of the sentences, you go, oh, I like that one. In this sense, the process of synthesis is both a life-generating and love-activating principle. The word psychosynthesis literally refers to the integration of the various aspects of the psyche into a more whole and complete self. It is fundamentally an inclusive and love-oriented psychology, in the sense that no part of the self is rejected or excluded. So Tom talks a lot about how you can't exclude any part because the self or the soul needs every part in order to mature. Well, what if we applied that same thing to a relationship? What if in our relationships, we need all of those experiences for the soul of the relationship to mature? So thank you, Tom. The movement in psychosynthesis is always towards embracing both the light and the darkness, infusing life with love, including the most difficult and wounded aspects of who we are. Assagioli once referred to love as, quote, a distant, dim recollection of original unity, as though love were deeply encoded in our genes, something we remember that serves as an attractive force, compelling us to join with one another, to exist not just as a separate individual, but within the context of relationships. From this perspective, entering into a relationship with another person might be viewed as a cosmic imperative to reconnect with the experience of original unity. One way to begin activating the principle of synthesis. So I also tried to write, when people were reading this book, so what are we going to do? How do these principles help us in relationships? So there's a little bit of that in each section. Begin activating the principle of synthesis in a relationship is to shift from an either or way of viewing things to a both and mindset. For example, I am both excited and worried when Lynn, that's my wife, she's not here today, when Lynn tells me this week she wants to adopt another dog, and a Carolina rescue dog at that, an American dingo wary of human contact. The both and mindset allows us to hold different and what might seem to be opposing perspectives. In this way, it acknowledges the complexity of our experience. The either or frame of mind can lead to divisiveness and fragmentation, my way or the highway, while the both and approach supports collaboration and wholeness. One more piece. Of course, in all relationships, there will be times when the tension builds between two people and we find ourselves at odds with each other. We become disheartened and troubled, and we must learn to bear the hard times and some degree of darkness when our old wounds and fears reappear. In our marriage, Lynn and I acknowledge our difficulties when they arise, yet we also try to maintain a sense of perspective. Somewhere early on in our relationship, we rather humorously developed a tri-level classification system for our tensions and disagreements, and this is true. In sequential order from the most mild to the most disturbing, we would identify troubling events as a, quote, kerfuffle, a debacle, or a shitstorm. I still remember our very first difficulty when I decided Lynn was eating too much of the popcorn too quickly at the movie theater out of our shared bag and not thinking about me. An event later referred to as the popcorn kerfuffle. We now each get our own bag. I'm not sure exactly how or why this seems to be helpful, but maybe it lets us accept the event as a moment in time, something that is part of the larger whole or synthesis of our lives together, and then let it go. I've shared this classification system with a couple of my clients who later remarked they found it helpful. Remember, synthesis is an inclusive principle and nothing needs to be excluded or rejected. We can even make room for the very occasional shitstorm and then get back to the business of learning how to unfold our love. And with that, what we're going to do, all three of us are going to read, and then we'll come back to the group. So if there are questions or things that come up with each piece or something you want to comment, just make some notes. I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
Whew, thank you, John. It's quite a wonderful perspective on the concept of synthesis. Thank you. So when I was preparing for talking today, I had a really hard time. I felt on really shaky ground, and I wished I hadn't written my chapter, which is something that's come up every step of writing this chapter. And I realized that the level of vulnerability that came up around sharing it is exactly what has been my journey in relationship, is really working closely with vulnerability. And Anne, when you asked the question for me, what question, or one of you asked, what's the question you sit with today? What popped into my mind was, how can I be open and vulnerable enough to embrace the divine in relationship? So I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read a little bit from my chapter, tell you a little bit about it. Where we go. My chapter was originally titled The Call of Selves, because that is what it was for us. And it's now named in the book as Marriage as a Crucible of Transformation. And our relationship is definitely both. I start the chapter with a quote from a woman named Daphne Rose Kingma, who wrote a book called Weddings from the Heart. And it's something Randall and I referred to when we were writing our vows. She said, when we speak of marriage in spiritual terms, we are inviting ourselves into it at a much higher level. To participate in a marriage of this kind is not only to enter into it as the estate that will bring us happiness, but to see it also as a spiritual crucible of transformation, of suffering, and also of great joy. The roadmap that my husband and I laid out for ourselves on our wedding day was the start of a spiritual adventure that took us to places we could not dare to have imagined. Had I known of the peaks and valleys between then and now, I wonder if my younger self, who spoke our vows, would have been willing to take the leap. When I revisit our wedding vows, I recognize that they were written from a place of profound wisdom connecting the two of us. I now appreciate that we were called into marriage by something vaster than the two of us to do the work of a lifetime. Through our vows, we aligned ourselves with the soul of our relationship. Over time, the soul has been the container that has held, encouraged, and directed us. Our partnership has been our spiritual crucible of transformation. When Randall and I met in San Francisco, I was a year into my first job in architecture after graduate school. Randall was years away from settling into his career in international environmental policy. There did not appear to be a lot of common ground between us, and there was an age difference of more than 5 years. After a few casual conversations, Randall's impromptu invitation to join him on a trip to Mexico ignited a spark that led to a lifetime commitment, not just to each other, but to our own growth. A few weeks after we met, I traded in 80 hours of overtime work for a 10-day first date to the Yucatan Peninsula, where we rented an old VW Bug and set off on a road trip. After a spectacular time amidst the temples, cities, and beaches of the Yucatan, I announced on the flight home that while this had been a wonderful trip, I really thought it would be best to end the relationship before it got too serious. We were at different points in our lives, and I didn't see how we could each evolve in the way I pictured by staying together. But what I didn't realize then is that the soul evolves in the way it needs to, not necessarily in the way that one imagines. The quietest of invitations called to me, asking me to linger a while and engage with this mysterious attraction. We enjoyed each other's lively company and our deep conversations, yet as we drew closer, my delight and my fears rose up in equal measure. Like a wary cat, I was fascinated by the hand reaching towards me, but was prepared to run at the slightest feeling of my own vulnerability. I should have said, but regularly ran when faced with the slightest feeling of my own vulnerability. There was something unique in Randall in our relationship that drew me closer as the months went by. I alternately acknowledged the potential and then did my best to resist both the call and the relationship. My resistance was partly my logical brain thinking our partnership was impractical, with each of us being at different stages of our lives, and partly my very scared, wounded parts not wanting to risk caring deeply and getting hurt. Now I understand that this was the relationship that would help me do the work of deep healing and connection necessary to grow. From the start, we embarked on explorations of nature, travel, friendship, and culture. I found myself doing things that I thought I had put aside permanently in order to develop my career in architecture, such as living and working in New Zealand and backpacking for months in Asia. It felt both reckless and exhilarating to pursue these adventures, as if a part of me was waking up and stepping into a potential I had never envisioned within a relationship. Perhaps it is not just what we fall in love with in another that attracts us to someone else, but what we fall in love with in ourselves as a result of being with another person. Our growing relationship led me to experience more of my passionate, curious, adventurous self, which awaited me beyond my life experience and the limited stories by which I define myself. From that first trip to the Yucatan, to hiking together in Yosemite and following bear tracks on cross-country skis, to meditation retreats and Sunday morning bike rides across the Golden Gate Bridge, we found something in one another that thrilled, stretched, and nurtured us. Those early adventures annealed us, forging our relationship into a true partnership. We could sense not just what each of us brought to the relationship, but the ways in which the relationship itself gradually began to transform and nourish us.
Nice.
The chapter goes on and actually walks through many of our vows, because in some ways, our vows, in writing our vows, we basically set up like an ideal model. We thought about what was possible in our relationship and spoke them in front of our friends and family. And through our vows, we explored and tuned into the container of our marriage, which I now refer to as the soul of our relationship. That is what the title of my chapter refers to as a spiritual crucible of transformation. To be honest, many times over the years, I have not been able to find the part of myself that created and committed to that container. And my chapter explores many of those times. Fortunately, I am imbued, and Randall is certainly imbued with a very strong willingness to love, and that has kept us going. So another quote from the book. I realize now that the very vessel for our transformation was what had united us at the start. We needed a reminder to trust the vessel, even if we were not always able to fully trust each other. When times were challenging, our marriage was solid enough to hold what was happening between us until we individually felt our feet firm on the ground. I say our relationship took us to the door of our own personal process, and then it was our choice to do the work that would allow us to show up fully for each other. In the past several years, in part due to a lot of therapy and personal work, couples therapy, personal therapy, and certainly in part due to my psychosynthesis journey and the frame that psychosynthesis holds, I have developed a profound faith in this deep, timeless presence, both holding us and guiding us. It's like a big hammock in which I can lean back into and rest. I've learned to lean into this presence and ask, in good times and challenging times, what is being asked of us now? I actually don't know what called me to write this chapter, other than Anne, who called me on the phone, and John. But I do know that my sincere wish is that someone somewhere will find comfort and inspiration in what I wrote and will benefit from bringing, as John says, the living practice of psychosynthesis into your relationship.
Oh,
And with that, I pass it to Anne.
thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you didn't throw it away. There's so much there, richness. John, thank you. And you guys, all of you here, you get a sense of different voices. The way John did his, the way Amy did hers, and now you'll hear another voice, mine. My chapter has a title that I love, and I'm going to read you from the beginning of it and the end of it. And in the middle, there's about 56 years, which I'm not going to read, but you can read. The title, which I love, as I said, Learning to Love from 1964 to Yesterday Afternoon. Okay, that's what it's about. It's about learning. In 1964, when I was 24, at a very inopportune time in my life, as I was already engaged to be married to someone else, I fell in love with a handsome, charming, and deeply intelligent man. I spent the last 57 years learning to know Tom, myself, and us as a married couple. Our first real meeting. Sitting in the dark on the grass behind a house where a party was going on, we shyly spoke about many things that were important to both of us. Books we remembered, scenes from D.H. Lawrence novels that we both recalled, experiences in college, adventures, traveling in Europe, our families, our lives, our hopes and dreams for the future. We were young. That night, I found myself sharing things I had never told anyone before. They were things I cared so much about, but which had found little resonance over the course of my life. By the quality of his listening and his responses, I could tell that what I said didn't puzzle him, nor was he judging me to be strange or weird. What's more, he seemed to be interested and perhaps even to understand. There is something beautiful and rare here, I silently thought to myself. I was speaking to him about my inner world, a deep and private internal experience that I had been aware of since I was young. My name for it was the secret world. Later that evening, as I listened to him speak, I noticed that he was looking at the ground as he talked. I realized that he also felt shy and cautious about sharing the deep places inside himself. I wondered if he knew about the secret world too. As we sat together on the grass in the dark behind the house, which was still alive with the sounds and lights of the party, time seemed to disappear. When it began to rain gently, we didn't run for shelter. We could hear thunder and see lightning in the distance, and we stayed. Something about this moment, this sense of connection, of being understood, held us both. Two deep and lonely souls were finding each other. It was the beginning of a long journey with many adventures, many trials, and so much learning. So that's how the book opens. And now toward the end, so fast forward, here we are. We have had the great privilege of many years together. In hindsight, I think we needed every minute. There are no adequate words to express what a precious gift it's been to have a partner in the long journey of awakening, including through very challenging times of change and growth. If you are so fortunate to find someone to travel with you, to live life beside you, with whom you share a core of values and a commitment to growing in awareness, to waking up even through the hard times, don't lose them. This kind of company is precious. This is something I knew intuitively that first night, sitting outside in the dark. It doesn't mean the road isn't rough and bumpy, that it doesn't have some very challenging and unexpected turns. It means that you and your partner, if you are fortunate to have one, can learn to be a match for it if you stay connected to yourself and to each other and are willing to keep learning and growing. You will become wiser from living through those times, and you will be closer to each other because of meeting those challenges together. Your capacity to love and understand will grow and deepen. When I look back now, it's so clear to me that these many years have been a journey of learning. What a wonderful frame that is for a committed relationship. Maybe that is, in fact, what commitment means, the willingness to learn together. Our relationship has been a journey of finding and losing, a journey of getting up again and finding again, a journey of adventure and discovery. It's been a courageous journey for which I'm very proud and forever grateful. When we left Roberto Assagioli, by the way, Tom and I did have the great privilege of meeting him. When we left Roberto Assagioli for the last time in the fall of 1972, he said to us with a smile and a twinkle in his eyes, "Remember to leave a little room for the mystery." Here is my offering on behalf of the mystery inherent in relationship. A deep bow to the mystery of two who choose to take this journey together, to the mystery of what they will learn from each other and what they will teach each other and learn together, to the mystery of my being here with you and of you being here with me. May all couples open to this mystery and grow in awareness and love. You know, I would have said this in the beginning, but I was so happy to have the chance to write that. And so I jumped on it. I just didn't know how many years it was going to take.
Well, for us, Anne, it was worth all those years.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna open up the floor to hear your reflections, your shares, maybe your questions. There are quite a few of us, so be mindful of others and be real, I
And
guess.
and Amy, can I make one quick note before we do? I just wanted to note that Walter Holt has joined us. And Walter, when you read this book, we hope you will read it, also has a chapter in the book. And there's 11 chapters. So now 4 of the chapters are in the room. So I'm just waving to Walter.
Thanks, Walter, for coming.
Thank you, John. And I apologize for being late. I've been preoccupied with music and deadlines. And so I missed the time. I got the time wrong. Sorry. Good to be here. Good to see everybody.
I would love to make a quick observational comment that, Anne, when you were speaking near the end, because I'm recording this, I have it on speaker view, and only the person speaking shows up. And a couple of times, Tom made these little humming sounds, and so his picture showed up, and he had this just adoration and love. So hearing you speak of your relationship and seeing the relationship in progress as we speak was beautiful.
Oh, that is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's so moving to me to hear you, honey, describe so beautifully the roots and root of our love for all these years, and I'm just so grateful that I got to be part of it. And what you say about learning, I think, is just the key. It's learning together from whatever happens, and that is what the journey is about, really. So I was moaning over here and smiling.
Other shares or voices? We thought we would create this little space, right, Amy and Anne, within the group. And when we're ready, or if there's not more that wants to be spoken, we are going to move into some dyads for some further exploration. But we have the time if people would like. Yeah, Amy, we have a little bit of time for any comments while we're all together. And it might help us. It probably will help us because this is like our first time reading to anybody, sharing the book with anyone outside each other.
I'd love to jump in here. It was the pieces you chose were all very moving, and they were ones that Tom and I had already read. So it was especially wonderful to hear them a second time.
Your Tom.
My Tom. Yes.
Yes.
We're constantly doing that, clarifying which Tom. My Tom unfortunately had a previous engagement in Greenfield and had to jump up and leave, and he's very sorry he's not here, but he'll listen, he'll catch the recording. We have been on this journey with you in a way. I remember getting the call from Anne asking if we wanted to participate in this incredible project. And at the time I knew we couldn't put the time in, but we put the time in another way. We didn't put the time into writing a chapter and doing all the group work that you did as 16 authors, but we were putting the time in on our relationship, and it is so worth it. It is so worth it. And I'm so glad you chose the word willing to be included in the title, because of course it has special resonance with will in psychosynthesis, and just the sheer choice that we keep making, that we're learning to keep making. That word learning you mentioned, Tom. It's all about learning to make use of everything that happens and choosing to do that, not just letting it happen by circumstance, because some learning will happen by happenstance, but choosing to learn and then choosing to keep loving in spite of the pitfalls that inevitably cross our paths. So I feel like we've been a living incubator of what you all have been doing. And it's really fun to be here with you all now and celebrate this amazing accomplishment.
Thank you.
And if you do a follow-up, a sequel for parents, Tom would love to be part of that. He mentioned that before he left, willing to love as a parent. And I have been also experimenting with willing to love as a family member and making great strides.
There are lots more books to write. I'm not going to write them, though. I'll be a consultant.
I was just going to say the same. But willing to love in the family has also been a big part of my life. And it just, that word is so potent for me now. Thank you.
Does someone want to read what Randall wrote in the chat?
I can't because I'll also cry.
I'm happy to read it as a friend of Randall's. He wrote, all very beautiful and moving. I will cry too much if I try to speak. So just to say how grateful I am for Amy's offering, as well as for Anne's and John's.
Thank you, Randall.
Randall being Amy's husband.
Made me cry anyway.
I wanted to say something right here. You know, as you're preparing for something, you kind of imagine someone's going to ask this question and you're not going to know how to answer it. Anybody else do that? And the question I imagined, beside the fact I thought my sister might be here, but she's actually not, I don't think. The question I was imagining what someone says, yeah, you're talking about two people, but what if there isn't another one? And one of the favorite parts of my chapter is about that commitment. The commitment, you know, to learn and to love and to discover and to grow. And I was thinking, if I got that question, I'll just answer it now. What if there isn't another? That the commitment would be to yourself, to your deep self, to staying with that journey, to really listening inside. I say somewhere in my chapter, you know, we live in this materialistic, go too fast, extroverted culture. But what about, you know, and of course that contributes to all relationships, that commitment to really listening to who you are and growing that, letting it learn. So that's how I would have answered the imaginary question, because all the things we're saying could apply to two, that apply to two could apply to one.
Holly.
Yeah, I just was going to jump off of that a little bit, what Anne just said. It also, all of the willingness and the learningness and the opening and the long-termness can also apply to groups. I'm reading and teaching about a book called Radical Friendship by Kate Johnson, which, if you haven't seen it, is a really beautiful treatment of the Buddha's words about friendship, about spiritual friendship. And she talks a lot about Sangha, which is, most of you know, the Buddhist term for the community of people on the path with us, Sangha. it is being a beautiful road for me. I am in a committed relationship, but what is new to me in these months here is thinking about groups and thinking about society level change and transformation that can come from really seeing relationship on every level as motivated by love. That's really, I think, what Buddhism teaches us about everything, right? Come from a place of loving kindness towards yourself and towards everybody, and trying to figure out how to bring that into being in our fraught, terrible societal circumstances right now. You know, how to approach work for the liberation of everybody from that point of view. So listening to the three of you talk about these beautiful relationships that you're talking about, it's inspiring, and it's inspiring to me, not just on the level of my committed partnership with my wife, but as I say, on all those other levels as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Holly. Maybe we were a Sangha, but we never called ourselves that, but that could well have applied.
Sounds like it.
We always started with a powerful, a deep meditation, and the leader would be shared. It made a huge difference.
Holly, you mentioned something, and I think that I've come to realize, especially after writing my chapter and reflecting on how hard we have worked. And I realized that it's sometimes very difficult to love anybody else. And we can even be in a long-term relationship and be loving and still have a hard time meeting someone who's different than us. And for me, to be able to fully love on the collective level starts obviously with ourselves, but I think there are many ways that being in close contact with another person brings up all the ways that we're stuck that we may not be aware of when we're just dealing with our own inner world. So I think that I got a lot of hope about this book because I felt it was a really important step for people to begin to really look at where they're stuck, where they're wounded, where they need help, where they can't even let in the love from another person who loves them dearly. All the ways that we're wounded around being in relation with another person. And it can be one person or five people in the case of a family, Ruth, or in a larger community. But it really starts with our own woundedness. And yeah, I'm really grateful you brought that up, because I feel like this book is a fundamental step towards getting to that. And not necessarily just in a couple, but how do we relate to one other person? And let's start there.
So let me give this a little frame for what we're going to talk about. And you can talk about whatever's most alive in you about this topic. So here are a couple of prompts. What's present for you now around this topic of relationship and psychosynthesis? You may wish to speak to your own experience of being in a relationship, and you may choose that that's with your son or daughter, your partner, a friend who you're trying. It could be a challenging relationship, but whoever comes to you, maybe just take a moment and see if you want to reference some relationship in your life. And you could speak to it without identifying the person, but just if there's a relationship that you're drawn to, and what's up for you in relationship right now. It could be with your partner, but it could be with anyone. You can also just speak freely to, here's what comes up for me in relationships in general. You know, just something that's very present for you. So really the time is yours to use freely. These are just a couple of prompts to get you reflecting on what it is you want to bring into the conversation. Okay? So, Ami, when you are ready, you can just decide who in your groups is going to speak first, and then we'll send you a little note when it's time to switch.
Welcome back, everybody. So once again, we'd love to hear your shares or your reflections or insights. What's alive for you now?
I would just jump in with a very brief observation. Laura, who has read the book, I haven't gotten it yet, I am intending to, but told me that there are 2 same-sex couples in the book, which I was really thrilled to hear. I'm glad that happened. Thank you.
You're muted, Anne.
In fact, I'd love to jump in, Holly, and tell you that I think you had a really important effect on that fact, because I remember you telling me that it upset you that this project didn't have same-sex couples when I mentioned it to you years ago, right, Anne?
From Holly?
I remember her telling me to tell you that it was really important.
Oh, I don't. I hope I didn't do it that way. I don't remember that.
You did tell me, Kristen, Carlin.
Hmm.
And the first lifetime of this book didn't have same-sex couples in it. And I knew that was not okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm just grateful to hear it. I don't remember being so obnoxious however many years ago, but I certainly.
I didn't think it was obnoxious at all. I thought it was true and just needed to tell Anne. All good.
Look like Mindy, you had your hand up. Were you going to add something?
Yeah, because a memory just flooded through my head. It was before COVID, and Ami, it was the first time I met you. And I remember you came into the meeting. We were doing the Psychosynthesis Northeast meeting in Greenfield, I think. And you were talking about the book, and Jan was there, and a few other people. And you were talking about this book. And Ami came forward and was saying something, and we had a conversation. I don't remember specifically what you said, but you felt that, and so very strongly about that. And then whatever the conversation was, I said, well, somebody said it's not alive in psychosynthesis really, and then I said not yet, and you repeated after me. You don't remember this, Anne, but you said to me, not yet.
I did?
Yep. So it's just, I had to share the memories. It just flooded into my head, or I might have exploded.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was such an evolving process. And there was a first lifetime of this book. It wasn't this book at all, really. It was another version of something about relationship. And it had to stop. And it did stop. And I had a lot to do with it. But those of you who spoke to me outside of this helped me get there. And I realized I couldn't live with myself if we didn't change this. So we began again, and it almost all fell apart, but we gave birth to something very beautiful that I feel so proud of.
Walter had his hand up.
Well, I wanted to underline that, and that it took courage and constancy, persistence on your part, and everyone in the group at large was with you on it, totally, and everyone except Jan, and that was hard because it fell apart. And now I want to thank you, Amy and Ami, but Mindy, those of you who who spoke up on that, because that kind of courage and embrace of the larger community that we're all a part of really is crucial, totally crucial. And I'm grateful for it. I really am happy for the same-sex couples in particular that we have. Beautiful, beautiful writing.
It's the Sangha. What was the Sangha at work? I wouldn't have known that then, but it was. And then also, you know, I just remember getting the point was like, I'm not going to be able to live with myself if I don't say something. I didn't know what would happen when I said something, but I just had that feeling. And that was a spiritual moment for me, you know, from really deep inside. So here we are. Here we are.
Thank you for your leadership. Is some of what I think we're saying, Anne. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Some of us tried to, and we knew that, I knew anyway, I can only say I knew for sure that you were the one who could turn the aircraft carrier around.
And Carolyn, the fact that you spoke up and Mommy spoke up,
Yeah.
and others, that could have been the tipping point for Anne. I don't know, but
It helped me a lot. It helped me a lot.
sure.
We need each other.
That's
We need
powerful.
each other so much.
Yeah.
Great, yeah.
Val, you were going to get your voice in?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate the awareness in this meeting of including those of us without a primary relationship in the conversation, and acknowledging that that doesn't mean that you're not in relationship, right? And that said, you know, the choice, I was thinking about this, that there's in psychosynthesis that idea of choice, the both and moving towards synthesis and choosing, right? What is the right path in this moment? And in a relationship that stays, each of you talked about, you know, having chosen to continue to stay in the love even through the challenges. And I think, you know, sometimes the choice to not stay in the romantic relationship in the challenges is also a valid choice and an important choice and a difficult choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm glad you're bringing that up. That's really important. Sorry, do you want to say a little more about
I would
that?
love to hear your thought on it.
Yeah. So it's interesting because, you know, one of the things I've sometimes said to clients as we look at relationships that we're in, do we stay, do we leave? And I once said something like to somebody, you know, the lifespan of any particular relationship isn't always the same as your lifespan. In fact, it can only be one. You can't, right? That would go to the end of your life. But you've been in many relationships, the lifespan of which was shorter than your own lifespan. So relationships stop and start, right? Start and stop. And also that it's funny that not funny, but it's interesting that I'm in the book because I had been married or in a relationship for 4 years when I wrote my chapter. So I had to say, you guys sure you want me? I mean, you're all like 20 years, 30 years, 55 years. So I ended up writing, you know, I had come out of a relationship. It ended that I chose not to stay in. And it was a very difficult process. So hopefully the book will speak to people beyond whether or not they see themselves as just in this one relationship that expands over this long period of time. It would be my hope that this book could be useful to anybody. And I'll be curious to see what you all think and if have suggestions for us in terms of how we bring this book out into the world, because this is our first attempt. And so that kind of feedback, Val, about how we're using language today is important. If we end up on a podcast somewhere talking about the book, or this kind of feedback will be really useful to us.
Yeah, it does seem important to register that at least for me, there isn't a one is better than the other.
Definitely not.
But
Yeah.
it does, when the book is all about relationships that stay, then it does seem, as if it is identifying that staying is better.
I think it's more these were the choices that we made. Someone did more than one person has asked, what about the relationship that didn't work out? And I think that's also a call of self.
Yeah.
You can be called into a relationship and you can be called out of it, that you realize that you learned what you got out of that relationship. So it is true, you can be willing to love and choose to step out of a relationship. And you're absolutely right. That's not discussed that much. But for me, it's more, are you listening closely to what's true for you and where your next step is? And that may not be necessarily in the relationship you're in.
Well,
It's funny, when I hear about relationships that end after 30 years, I think, with all due respect to my beloved husband, that I can imagine, I can't imagine, but that could be me, right? That you never know what happens years down the line. And I don't think that will be me, but I'm always sort of surprised at what you wake up to over time and where that takes you.
Valerie, this is a real important piece, and I appreciate what we're talking about right now. I mean, because not only is the end of a long relationship or a close relationship frowned upon by many in our society, but it's painful and hard to do. I think we need this book now for people transitioning from a relationship too. That is, I don't know if it's studied enough yet and presented clearly.
Certainly, most of us have more relationships that end than relationships that don't end.
You'd almost have to, by definition.
Right.
I think we could use more help with that.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising this, Val.
I'd like to say something for what you're saying, Val, and just how it's not being researched. It's very interesting about whose hands this book gets into, because if it would have gotten into my hands before I ended my marriage, life could have been different. Or if I would have studied psychosynthesis, what path was I on when I couldn't stay in my marriage any longer, And hearing the 58 years later in what you shared, it does affect me. It makes me wonder, but then, there's all different things that went on during this for me. But I just think where on the path a person is when they are blessed with something like this to be able to apply. Because I think that my awareness is that either way, it's hard. You get out, it's hard. You take yourself with you. We all know that, right? You stay in it, you take yourself with you. And the part that I really think is important is that you grew together. You and Tom, and you
read my chapter. Not always.
Right, but I'm saying, but that's what was, that's the piece that was sort of talking with where it ended and where it didn't end. So you grew together. And you grew together and you worked at the pieces together, So at any point in time, anybody could say, well, I can't do this anymore, because they don't know how, and that's why these kinds of things. And I do think it needs to be looked at more about the people who leave and have some more stories, because one half of the couple will thrive and the other half won't, either way. It's just such an interesting science, I have to say.
I do have to say one thing, which is that I married the man that I was engaged to when I met Tom. That's part of the story that's not told. And it wasn't a long time, but I did that. I didn't have the courage to go with my heart at that moment. Neither.
Well, I didn't have the courage either.
So there you go.
Yeah.
You see,
But you know, the thing I'm thinking is what Anne said about the touchstone of learning. So, and if I think about our marriage, I think that we grew beyond certain relationships into another relationship. But in each of those, I think there's some phrase where someone, yes, I've married to the same woman, but I've had many marriages. So I'm just thinking, and then if you have this choice to leave a relationship, the question is, what did you learn from it? And that learning you don't lose, you take it with you to whatever's next. So it seems to me that the learning is the touchstone or the fruit of whether a relationship thrives or fails. And ultimately that's the learning of the soul on earth, trying to mature and trying to ripen and grow. So anyway, I just think what Anne said in the chapter has been so true for me in terms of what I've learned. And you could say certain relationships between me and Anne failed. They weren't working. And we had to find another way to be together. And that was, from one point of view, it was a failure, but there was a huge amount of learning in it. So
I think that just to sort of jump on that word failure, when you leave a relationship, even if it's been a 30-year relationship, it seems to me that if you have the courage to leave it, it's a success. And if you've had a relationship, you've been through a number of things, you've grown, it's a success.
Yeah.
Whether it ends or not doesn't determine whether it's a failure.
that's a good way of saying it.
And it is so important. And it brings to mind one piece that is in our chapter, which is about our marriage vows. They were present. We will stay together as long as we're both happy. If one of us isn't happy in it, we got to do something different. And every January 1st, we sit down together, and we've done this for all 34 years or 5, whatever it is. And sit down and say, well, where are we? Do we want to continue? And it's not definite that we till death do us part.
I love that you say it every year. I remember that.
And on our most favorite anniversary of the several times we've, gotten married again.
So we are just about at time. Thank you, Walter. I think it'd be nice to just take a moment to once again meet each other again and acknowledge each other for the journey that we have taken during this time. And for being willing to explore relationships.
I just wanted to appreciate Ami for coordinating and PsNE for hosting us. And also just to say, if you haven't seen the book and you want to get the book, it's available on bookshop.org and it's available through Amazon, the big corporate monster.